Hey, deserved listeners, 90 Day Fiancé. Let's watch.
So I think if someone is being pressured to do something that they don't want to do, that isn't grounds for a healthy relationship.
Am I pressuring you to get married with me?
I don't think you've pressured me yet.
Okay, so to catch you up, the parents are saying that they're really concerned about them getting married and they don't want them to get married. And then Jibri is saying, yeah, we've had so much stress already, then what happens if we get married and there's other kinds of stresses? Seems like if we're already stressed out, then maybe this is, we shouldn't get married. And when he says that, I'm like, what stress are you I don't know what stress he's talking about, because the conflict between, I don't know if there's been actual conflict between the two of them other than the fact that he started saying he doesn't want to get married all of a sudden, which is fine, but that's distressing to her. And they had a discussion last episode about that. But anyway, so he's having some concerns and she thinks that the parents are influencing him and friends are influencing him. And it certainly looks that way in the edit, but who knows what's really happening. I mean, before he started hearing other people's concerns, it seemed he was 100% into it. But I don't know. It could be that now that they've actually spent some time together in person, he is starting to realize maybe he's not as into her as he thought he was, but who knows. And I thought what would happen right here is that, because so often on this show, the Mionas of the world would go after the parents. They would triangulate instead of going directly to him. And everyone's, including Jibri, is like, yeah, I don't want, essentially saying he doesn't want to get married. The parents don't want him to get married. He doesn't want to get married. The other relative, and Miona is the only one kind of saying things pro-marriage, and she's not saying anything wrong. And they asked, what would happen if you didn't get married? And she says, well, I would leave him because I would consider that to be a sign that he isn't really committed to me, which has some wisdom to it, but also you could see it being her friend and being like, well, it doesn't necessarily mean that. It just means that maybe he just needs some more time. So, but she's entitled to have that opinion. I don't think it's that out of line. And then the parents are saying, well, if you're so in love, how come your relationship is so fragile? Which makes some sense. But then she's like, well, but if our marriage and what we've been fighting for is so fragile, as hearing other people's random opinions causes him to not want to be with me and not marry me, then it's his fragility that I'm afraid of and would run away from and would say, I can't deal with that. My love isn't fragile. My love has been, I've been wanting to marry him from the beginning. And now all of a sudden he doesn't want to marry me. So, that's why. So that makes some sense as well. So anyway, I thought Miona would triangulate with the parents and say, this is you're getting in his head. But instead, she asks one of the most healthy questions in a demeanor that is one of the most healthy demeanors we've ever seen on the show. She quietly and calmly and in a vulnerable way turns to him and says, do you feel like I'm pressuring you to marry me? And that's the central question. And then he says, yeah. And if I were Miona, I'd be like, well, that's not how I felt about it. I thought we were both into this. And now suddenly I'm pressuring you because I want to follow through with the thing that you and I committed to for so long. Now, I don't know. Maybe she had pressured him before. It certainly didn't come across that way, but we could never know what was going on behind the scenes. So she turns and says, am I pressuring you? And then he says, yeah. Now, what he should say is, I'm glad you're pressuring me because that means you love me, and it makes sense you're pressuring me because we had agreed to get married for so long. That was the whole point of you coming out here. So it makes sense you'd be pressuring me. But to give her this message that she just came out of the woodwork and just started pressuring him to get married, and this is all her doing, is, I don't think, accurate, and I don't think fair. And it does, if that's truly how Jibri is thinking in this moment, it does make me wonder how dependent he is on his mom, because if this is some massive switch in reality for him in terms of how the show is edited, it points to his enmeshment with his mom as getting into his head. But I don't know.
The conversation I had with you today, you said,
it's going to be over if we don't get married now.
Right now I'm frustrated. you being inconsiderate about this beach wedding that you have in your head and calling it your beach wedding, and you saying that if it's not how you want it, that you're not going to have it, and you are impatient and you are wanting everything right away.
Okay, I think there's some validity to his request here. I wouldn't do it in front of the family in this context. I also wouldn't say that this is essentially one of the reasons why you don't want to get married at all. But, there's some legitimacy to that. It's like, I feel like you're pretty rigid about the beach wedding. You wouldn't have a conversation with me about it. You gave kind of an ultimatum. So, okay. But in this context, I think he really needs to clear up. Does he love her, and does he want to be with her? Because he's giving a lot of impressions that he doesn't, which could really hurt her.
Like entitled millennial, like you want everything in a microwave, and I don't think that's fair. And then also,
I'm interrupting you right now, Jibri. I absolutely want to encourage you to say how you're feeling,
right,
and about what's going on for you,
right. But
I'm also not going to sit here while you're almost calling her names.
Yeah, good. An entitled millennial. It's like, why, this is ad hominem attacks. So in a weird twist of events, the mom is... Now, I will say that it's interesting and notable that she's doing it, because if we just heard this situation or saw this scene and we didn't know how old Jibri was, we would think he was 18, because that's kind of the way she's coming across. If I were there and I was a little birdie on her shoulder, I'd be like, if you want him to grow up and think like an adult and act like an adult and consider himself an adult, you want to treat him like an adult. And the way you treat a fellow adult is you say, and you need to say something. You can be like, Jibri, you're free to do what you want, but I just want to kind of defend Miona a little bit and say, is there another way you could have said that? I don't know. It's not my business, but calling her a entitled millennial, that seems like a crossing the line. But, what do I... it's just a tonal difference, the way she talked. Now, parents sometimes have a really hard time, particularly in 20s, when their children are in their 20s, transitioning to really considering their adult children adults. Because their entire life, they've treated this human being as a child. And so, it's understandable. But I think it is emulative of their dynamic, which I think has been playing itself out over the season, which I think results in some of the frustration she has about him and some of his wishy-washiness. Because when you're treated that way, you act that way and you think of yourself that way. And when you think of yourself as needing other people to tell you what to do, then the mechanism inside of yourself to really evaluate and figure out what's best and what you're supposed to do, you never really develop it. And you also don't trust yourself, because whenever you do take a leap and this other person comes in and says, no, you're wrong, or I disagree, and let me lecture you about all the ways you're wrong, then you're like, oh, well, maybe I should just wait for someone to tell me what to do.
No, I'm saying the mentality, not Miona, the mentality of it's not going your way and it's not gonna happen. I don't like that mentality.
That.
I just don't like it, I guess.
I told you a million times. First of all, you shouldn't even talk with anybody else about our problems before you talk to me. And second thing of all, it's not everybody else's wedding, it's our wedding.
Yeah, she's getting upset, which is understandable. I mean, she's essentially being ganged up on in a sense. And she says, you need to talk about these things with me. She's still hurt by him calling her names, right? And it's like, so you didn't talk with me about it? Why is it coming out now? Which is totally understandable. I mean, just imagine for yourself that you're at dinner with your in-laws and suddenly all this stuff comes out. Like, excuse me?
And if it means leaving him there too, that's fine.
I don't think there's much else to talk about tonight.
Yeah, I think we're good.
All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really do.